All right. Well, we have to honor your time and to honor everybody who's here so far, as we might have other people coming in. My name's Dee. I'm one of the board members for your New Hampshire chapter. Thank you, Vincent, for organizing this evening with the same code. And it looks like everyone's done so. But what I would ask is that when we go over into the presentation mode, if y'all don't mind turning your mics off so that there's limited background and any other things to maybe interfere with the presenter, in this case, Mr. Troy Lavigne, topic and or to over talk anyone else. So feel free, if you do have anything that you want to say or ask any questions, please feel free to mute yourself, or there is a hand raise in the bottom left-hand corner. You can certainly raise your hand and we'll get around to recognizing that and calling on you to give everybody opportunity to ask questions and be able to interact, because interaction and questions and answers and having a conversation is always much more of a great mind-body connection to really get what the presenter is saying and to be able to take it in on a different cellular level than simply listening to chalkboard talk. So in gathering the information from Troy while we were prepping this, he basically let me know, he's like, I could absolutely talk about this till the cows come home, and then once they come home, send them with notes back to send to y'all. But what we're going to do is, if it becomes organic and in nature, and be able to have a more question and answer and an inquisitive time, then let's do that. So I said, okay, deal. So that being said, we welcome you, Troy. Thank you so very much. Troy Lavigne is going to be one of our presenters for the April Education Seminar and Retreat. The course that he is offering is the sensory approach to manual therapy, SAM for short. You will see that on the CVent linkage, which will be green lighted hopefully tomorrow. I have the board getting the link tonight or tomorrow morning, and to make sure that everything is looking good and all the connections are working, and then we'll be able to green light it. So I'm super pumped to be able to have Troy be our first presenter. So Troy, the first question that I have for you is, because this is how we roll here in New Hampshire, if you were any animal, what animal would you be and why?
Oh, that is a great question. I play this game with my daughters all the time, actually. And I would like to be an elephant. The why of it is very simple. They've always been my favorite animal. Why elephants are my favorite animal? No idea. Something I latched onto as a child. Um, but I actually have an interesting story that's in one of the slides. So since you brought it up, I'll tell the story to you now. Some of you might be familiar with, there's an old Indian fable about six blind men and a prince. And the prince has a challenge for these six blind men. And essentially, they're blind wise men. And he brings them to his palace, and he says to the six men, describe to me what an elephant is, as none of them have ever seen an elephant. And so the first blind man walks up to the elephant and runs into the side of the elephant and puts his hands along it and touches it and goes, oh, well, obviously an elephant is a wall. I mean, you can feel it. It's just this massive structure. And the next one goes up and touches it and feels this massive leg, and it feels like a big tree trunk, and he puts his arms around it and says, obviously an elephant is like a tree. And the third one touches the trunk, and the trunk is moving and all these, and it says, well, obviously the elephant is like a snake. And the fourth one touches the ear and feels the wind and goes, An elephant is like a fan, and one touches the tusk and says elephants must be like a spear, and the last one touches the tail and tries to pull on it and notices that it's obviously elephants are like ropes. And the amazing thing about this is that each one of these wise blind men were right, and yet we're 100% wrong. And elephants originally were my favorite animal just because I liked elephants. And when I came across this fable, I started thinking about it in terms of what we as massage therapists do. Because you can do a thumbs up, you can put your hands up. I'm a big fan of screens, but if your screen's black, that's fine. You can unmute yourself. But like hands up if you do what you would consider Swedish or myofascial or deep tissue or trigger point therapy or orthopedic, right? Each one of these are cupping, taping, I-stem, gua sha, needle, chiropractic, PT, physio, massage, osteo, whatever version of treatment we want to give the world around us is either the tail or the fan or the tusk or the spear. That's not care. That's not treatment. That is a portion of treatment. And it can be effective. Like it can be effective, but it is not the whole image. And so this class, the sensory approach to manual therapy that I created back in 2012, I had this big crisis of faith coming to Jesus moment where I remember I had read several really interesting research papers about how manual therapy essentially is a lie. And it was really hard to hear that as a massage therapist who traveled to the Olympics. I worked with professional cycling. I worked at Tour de France. I worked at professional hockey teams in the Colorado Avalanche. I'd worked with pediatrics and I'd seen results. I'd worked in hospitals, although taught at Johns Hopkins University. I'd taught all over the place. And so in my mind, massage therapy absolutely works. And the way I'd been teaching it and I had been taught it was the way it worked because look at the results we were getting with it. And so when I read this paper and then I started reading more of them, and it took me down this really deep 5-year long rabbit hole, where I came to this crisis of faith where I realized everything I had been telling my clients it wasn't wrong, but I was talking to my clients about the tail or the spear or the ear, but I wasn't telling them what massage therapy was. And so I created this class, I created a mission essentially on my own to go and find that answer. I'm still looking. It is 2024 and I'm 12 years later, I'm still looking. I think I'm getting closer to some answers, but definitely not to the answer of what manual therapy is. But the reason I called it the sensory approach is because the more I look into how manual therapy, not just massage therapy, manual therapy, how it works, the more I'm coming to understand that it has to do with the sensory system more than anything else. And the sensory system is not just our skin. That's our primary mode, tactile. But if you use essential oils, it's olfactory. If you have music on, or you speak to your clients, or you have shoes that go click, click on the floor, it's auditory. If the room is hot or cold, it's temperature based. There's so many more things to our sensory system. And that's us as an input device. We are inputting information to our clients. Now, the clients walk into our sessions and they have their own sensory system, which has nothing to do with us. How they detect the brightness of the lights, how they detect sounds, but also how are they feeling? Are they bloated that day? Like we have 8 senses in the human body. We don't have 5. The 3 missing senses that most people aren't aware of are proprioception, which we've probably all become familiar with, vestibular, which is our sense of balance in relationship to the center of the earth, and the last one is interoception. And interoception is like, how you say sometimes I'm hungry, or you take a deep breath, or you have to go pee? That's interoception. It's your internal sensations that dictate behavior unconsciously. And so when a client lays on the table, it doesn't matter. It matters less what you do to them with your hands, and it matters more what's happening to them inside their brain. And so if they're bloated and you're giving them an abdominal massage, the fact that they're bloated will dictate more about how you treat your client than your brain. As a massage therapist, I might sit there and say, okay, I'm going to do cat paw. I'm going to do the half moon. I'm going to help with peristalsis. I'm going to try to get rid of constipation. I'm going to go, from descending colon to duodenum to jejunum. I'm going to go through the small intestine. Like there are these techniques that we do for visceral manipulation that are well documented. But that's as an outside resource saying, I know what's best. But their sense of feeling bloated should change what I know because it changes my pressure, my speed of movement, whether I even touch their abdomen. And so the sensory system plays this superiorly dominant place in all interactions with our clients, from what we're doing right now via this meeting versus what you do in your clinic. And I remember I was never taught that in class. I was taught what the sensory system was and then, kind of moved on, but it wasn't given importance to the level that it should be. So to make that very mundane question long, elephant.
I love it. My my I love fables. So that 100% just spoke to my inner child and soul for fable telling, storytelling, passing on. I used to, as a child, get a lot of like Native American stories told to me and things, and I love that. So thank you for sharing. My
My
my next
father's
question.
actually my father's an indigenous, and he's indigenous, and he's part of the Algonquin tribe, and he's a firekeeper, and storytelling has become something that we is very much part of our family. Is all of his children, we are all major storytellers, and even my children now have begun to become big storytellers for the same reason.
Yeah, same in our family as well. So I love that. So speaking of that, let's go to um, what I would create, what I would kind of capture in the Native American culture, as well as storytelling. It would be grounding, right? Because a lot of getting into nature and everything would be feeling through the foot connection to the earth. So this would lead me to, you have what's called a foot experiment.
Yeah.
Please tell me about what your foot experiment
Yeah, so
is.
for this one, if you can put your camera on, it does make it a little easier for me because you're going to have to raise your right or left hand. Um, but again, if not, you can just unmute yourself and let me know what it is. But I'm just going to have everybody sit with their both feet comfortably on the floor. Okay. And then you can do it with your eyes closed or open. Really doesn't matter. It's up to you. But what I'm going to have you do is just pay attention to both of your feet. And when you're ready, you can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and just let me know which of your 2 feet is warmer than the other. Left, left, right, right, right,
Right.
right. There you go, left, left. Yeah. So obviously, we can have arguments for both, saying, okay, well, your left foot, closer to the heart, blood flow. We could say, okay, maybe there's diabetes, there's some underlying physiology. The truth is, your feet are the same temperature. They're exactly the same temperature. Until, and this is the part that blows my mind away, they did studies with very, very sensitive sensors inside a shoe where the moment you decide a foot is warmer, it gets warmer. But the temperature increase does not appear until after the decision has been made, which is amazing. Until then, they're the same temperature. So what does this mean for us as therapists? Well, I could have phrased that question by saying, are your feet the same temperature? In which case, most of you probably would have said yes. But I phrased it by saying, which of your feet is warmer? Which means I'm leading you in my questioning. So when a client comes into my office, I'm going to use this to my advantage by saying to them, tell me about the moments between your last session and today where you had good times. Tell me the moments that felt better. Not, I want to hear. They're gonna tell me whether I ask them or not. They're gonna tell me how much pain they're in, right? Clients are notorious for telling you how much pain they're in. I had a client come in today. I haven't seen her in 2 weeks. She comes in. She starts out with all of her discomfort. I say, okay, let's take a minute. Let's take a step back. And I go, I saw you 2 weeks ago. I know you got acupuncture last week. I saw you on a Wednesday. Why don't you tell me about your Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Pain-free, high levels of activity. The following week, mild increase in symptoms. She gets acupuncture. All her symptoms disappear again, pain-free, no symptoms return. The day that she's to see me, today, her symptoms return almost to the previous levels. She's highlighting in her mind this morning where she's been in pain for less than 24 hours. But she's forgetting that for 2 weeks, she was under a 4 on the pain scale and mildly pain-free. And so when I talk to my clients in my intake, I lead them with questions that makes them highlight in their mind their good moments. It doesn't take away from their pain. I don't deny them. I don't not want to hear about it, but I want them to also tell me about the good reasons. And there's a very simple reason for that. If I were to, it's called immersion therapy. I'm sure some of you have heard of it before. If you don't speak another language, let's say, I don't know if any of you speak German, but let's say if you don't speak German and I bring you to Frankfurt and I plop you down in the middle of Frankfurt and I say, I'm going to come back in 4 months and pick you up. If you were to surround yourself by German speaking individuals, German television, German radio, and try to read only German and avoided other languages, in 3.5 to 4 months, you would have headaches, but your brain would have rewired through synaptic plasticity to be able to communicate in German. You would have learned. It's that simple. You would learn another language. Now, you wouldn't be perfect in it, but you'd be good enough to get by. Pain has this amazing ability that, well, the brain in general, but pain seems to be this really highlighted concept, especially when it relates to learning, because we have such emotions attached to it, where we learn to complain about our pain societally wise. And it's in this really interesting study by this guy, David Brown, called The Evolution of Pain, which I talk about in my pain class, which I think I'm doing for you guys as well. Pain, the other 4-letter word. And essentially it talks about the evolution of how, as creatures, because we're societal creatures, we get praise and protection for being in pain, but only to certain levels, right? So if you're the patriarch or the matriarch, it tends not to be rewarding to be in pain. And so we tend to complain less. But if you're not the patriarch or the matriarch, you tend to be rewarded for pain. A child is a good example. The man flu is a good example, right? And so when you have these moments of pain that allow you to receive positive reward, we learn to incorporate them into our behavior more frequently. So when I'm speaking to my clients about their discomfort, I want them to learn that I'm going to give them positive reinforcement if they talk to me about how good they're feeling. Because the other thing that happens when they start talking about how good they are, how good they feel in their body, is they start getting confidence of movement and they move away from something called pain catastrophizing. And they start moving into a realm of, I feel safe, I feel confident, and these activities seem feasible. And that makes a really big difference in our activities and our choices. So that little foot experiment is one I use all the time, because the choices of words that we as like the shirt I'm wearing today right now is not what I was wearing 5 minutes before this video started. I'm in my pajamas, right? And so what we wear, what our office looks like, how we address our clients, and the words we use really have a profound impact on the interaction that our client walks away with. New studies are coming out where they talk about this as bedside manner. You guys will notice I'm using my hands a lot, but I'm not using my hands down here where you can't see them. I'm using them on purpose up close. And the reason is, if you're familiar, hands up if you're familiar with the concept ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response, okay? So in ASMR, how you move your hand, being able to see and predict what's happening, tends to be a calming state. Now, if you don't have this, you don't care. The hand doesn't bother you. Now that I've highlighted it, you might be hyper focusing on it, but in a couple minutes, you'll forget. And so when I speak to my clients and they're on the table or in the intake, I intentionally use my hands a lot because it's another tool in my toolkit to get through to them. It's not like that's the thing that makes them feel better, but it's one more thing that gives a percentage of change that helps them move in a direction of, I'm feeling safer, I'm feeling more confident, I'm feeling better, things like that. So that's the foot exercise, and I really enjoy that one because it really highlights, as massage therapists, how many hours is it in New Hampshire for massage therapy?
750.
750. So in Quebec, it's unregulated, which is, there's pros and cons. I was at National last year at the GR meeting that we had, and there are major pros to being an unregulated place. There are major cons as well. And when I was in Colorado, where I lived for 16 years, I was part of the group that brought it up to 750. We actually wanted it at more. But one of the downsides to being an unregulated place is that here in Quebec, massage therapists is really looked down on, compared to like in Ontario where it's 2,000 hours, and in British Columbia where it's 2,000 hours, and Alberta. And even in Colorado, I went to a school that was 1,500 hours. And so when I would talk to physios or doctors and they say, which school did you go to or how much training did you have? It plays, it's a snap judgment on their part. If they got to know me, they would understand that I'm relatively capable with my words, but it also plays into our perception. And so for most of the world, massage therapy is kind of like at the bottom totem pole of healthcare. Not that it should be by any means whatsoever. Like I passed my MCATs to get into medical school, and I chose to go into massage therapy because I value it greatly and it has incredible value. But educational wise, we are on the lower end of the totem pole. And so what happens is that we tend to get kind of like stuck in this box of not having all the tools, or that the tools that we have are too unscientific or pseudoscience. And though there is truth to that, it also gives us an amazing opportunity to use it to our benefit. Like, take advantage of that opportunity, because the risk of harm is almost non-existent with massage therapy. All that you'll get is a feel-good response. And so when it comes to really using every single ounce of knowledge and capabilities that you have as a therapist to help your clients get better, we're kind of in a better realm where we're not as restricted as a lot of other disciplines. A lot of other disciplines, their governing bodies are like rigid, and their scope of practice is much more. What the ABMP published last year, that we have 350 modalities in massage therapy. That's massive. No other profession has 350 modalities that we can all practice universally, right? Like, you have to become specialized in all these things. And so it gives us pros and cons. So it's using every ounce and percentage we can to help our clients get better. And if that means the sensory system, if it means how we speak to them, if it means fables, hey, use it all. It's only going to help them.
I would have to say, and counting, right? Because there's so many developing,
and
brilliant
it's interesting.
minds.
Yeah, and counting. And the thing is, it's interesting is these other disciplines. Like, I teach a lot at universities. A lot of my podcasts are with neuroscientists. I teach a lot with physio. I teach classes, and a lot of physios come to my classes, or PTs, things like that. The more we move massage therapy forward, what I'm seeing as a speaker of 15 years now almost, is that my classes are becoming less isolated to massage therapy, and they're filling up with multidisciplinary practices, but they want the massage therapy mentality now. It's not that what they do is not good. What they do has incredible value, and we honestly should probably be learning from them as well, but they want to learn what we know now. Whereas it didn't used to be the case. They want to have that hands-on touch much more. They see the value in it. Whereas 15 years ago when I'd sit in a class, I remember they'd be like, "You're a massage therapist. Why are you teaching this class? Why am I learning from you?" And now they want that information. So yeah, and counting, absolutely.
I think it's also huge that publicly being recognized through government supported programs and laws more in a positive green light has been helping as well.
The
And I
Pain-Free
think
Act
that
is
we
such a
are
big thing.
huge. And I do agree that we are in such a unique and powerful profession and career that mixes passion with such a profound way to be able to connect to the human body and basic forms of healing without using anything else but ourselves and maybe a tool here and there, and not a lot of professions can say that. So,
Yeah.
um,
If
so
if
speaking
anybody
of,
if anybody is interested on Facebook and Instagram, I just put this up the other day. If you guys don't know who Paul Ingram is, he runs a blog called painscience.com. He's a former massage therapist. He's retired now. He's in Vancouver. Um, he's a great influence of mine. I will warn you, if you read his website, you will probably go through the crisis of faith that I went through. That's where it all started for me. He's a massage therapist and he believes powerfully in massage, but he tears it down pretty aggressively before he gets to why it's good. But he put up a wonderful post the other day and he said, the majority of results about why hands-on therapy works boil down to three things and three things only: time, touch, and relationship. And I got to say, the more I look into the science, the more that's accurate. It's time with your client, it's how you touch them, and it's the relationship, your bedside manner. Those three things give your clients more than all the postural analysis, gait analysis, foam rolling, all the fascia, all the trigger point, all the orthopedic assessments. I mean, I've done all those classes. None of them help compared to time, touch, and relationship. It's good to have that knowledge in the back of your mind. It's important to have it to call on a drop drawer test for an ACL. It's important to be able to test the Faber test, and it's valuable to do those. But they mean nothing if the client doesn't trust you. They mean nothing if the client doesn't have that sense of relationship. And that's really what the science shows us as well, is that we're seeing long term. That's where all of the research is taking us. It's taking us down this pathway of bedside manner is where there's value in healing.
which is why we're also in such a very unique opportunity, is because there cannot be only one or two massage therapists, and having that the lack of competitiveness within our field is amazing, because I'm going to connect very differently to a set of clients than Pam or Corey or Jason or Barbara. All of us have clients that we are their person because of those three things, and valuing the uniqueness that each individual therapist brings about. And so I think that's amazing. So speaking of utilizing tools or anything that would be at our hand for helping a client, why would I maybe throw my kitchen sink at a client?
Yeah, so this is actually a book I'm in the process of developing. So you guys are getting the title of probably at least a year and a half to 2 years before it's ready for publishing. But it's this idea that I have. So I'm teaching at the Canadian Massage Conference in Calgary in June, and one of the classes I'll be teaching there is called "I Am Placebo Positive." And the reason I made this class is because I'm about to do a podcast later this month with this guy named Serge Melchon, who is the head neuroscientist and in charge of the chronic pain department at the medical university here in Sherbrooke. And he's going to do a podcast with me specifically on placebos, because the power of placebo is quite interesting. Now, the power of placebo has limits. It absolutely has limits. The same as my car has a limit in how far I can go before it runs out of, either electric charge or gas. The same as my energy has limits before it runs out and I need to rest and recover. Everything has limits. But the placebos are an interesting one in that their limits aren't fully understood yet, and the limits seem to be quite variable. We have these really interesting things called like open label placebos, where if you tell the person they're getting a placebo prior to treatment, they are still likely to have positive results, knowing it's not the real medicine. That's amazing to me. Like, That it's not to say the power of the mind, because it's not conscious. It's one of those subtle differences where people say, oh, see, the power of mind is amazing. It's not quite the same. The power of mind is active conscious thought. This is completely uncontrolled processes that we have no conscious behavior in. And the likelihood is actually it's unconscious behavior that how placebos happen. And so I'm going to put up a slide here for you guys to look at, because this is kind of what I mean by the kitchen sink here. Sorry. There you go. So this is what I talk about when I talk about the kitchen sink. So the question mark in the middle is, what is massage therapy? What are the components of a session that make it that your client walks away with a feel good behavior, feel good response, things like that? Um, and some people, like if we go to, let's say, biotensegrity would have been what we historically called the myofascial distortion method or myofascial release, things like that. The pain gate cycle would be, what Patrick Melzak and Wall talked about with pain and touch. If we go to the physiological, it'd be, okay, well, if your muscle sarcomeres are being sheared apart because the positive and negative charges aren't strong enough, that's a lactic acid buildup, and that would be inhibited tissue versus overactive tissue. And so all these interesting components individually play into um, how manual therapy works. But historically, what happens is and I'm trying to find a way to say this where I'm not calling anybody out, because it's not the intent and the goal is not to call people out, but someone who like stakes their reputation on myofascial release, for example, or trigger point therapy, or postural analysis, or you know doing a squat with your knees perfectly aligned between your big toe and your middle toe, and they're behind your toes. People who stake their reputation on biomechanics, on structure, on posture, on hypnosis, on the fact that it's all trauma based, it's all memory based. People who stake their reputation on energy work only, Reiki, polarity, whatever it is. What happens with these reputations is that we find ourselves getting boxed into believing. We create the belief ourselves that that one modality can solve 100% of the problems. Um, and we've probably all been practicing long enough where we can think of a few clients who we didn't help, who we were unsuccessful with. So we have to think about our box for a minute and say, wait a minute, if I don't help 100% of my clients, which nobody does, right? But if I don't help 100% of my clients, my box isn't big enough. It's that simple. I don't have enough tools in my toolbox. And so those concepts are in all theory. When a client comes into your session and when they walk in with either stress or discomfort, or they're seeking some version of change, positive change in their life, whatever we do to give them that positive change, when they walk away, the mechanisms that took place behind their feel good response are percentages of each of these concepts. It's not a single thing. It's not because you fix their posture that they feel better. It's not because they're moving different and their functional movement patterns or force coupling has changed. It's not because we've balanced their chakras. It's not because they've had a euphoric moment, cathartic moment, and they've broken down in tears on the table and they've processed their trauma. It's not that. It's a percentage of everything. So if it's a percentage of everything, the downside is you kind of have to become a jack of all trades. And most of us don't. The longer we're in this industry, the more boxed in we get. The more we move into the only thing I do is orthopedic. The only thing I do is sports. I'm specialized in pediatrics. People ask me all the time, especially on my website, like they ask me all the time, what can I expect from a session from you? Or do you treat athletes? And I go, yeah, of course I treat athletes. I used to all the time. Do I treat kids? Yeah, I specialize in pediatrics. I'm a lymphatic drain therapist through Vauders. I'm a sports ortho and all this. But what do I specialize in? The nervous system. And who has one of those? Everyone. That's what we're doing. It has nothing to do with a high-end athlete and a child with cerebral palsy consume roughly the same amount of energy on a given day. So why would I assume that techniques that work for a high-end athlete, wouldn't work for a child with cerebral palsy, and vice versa? If a technique I do works on a child with CP to calm their system down and get them into a parasympathetic state, why would those same techniques not work on an athlete? Why do I have to go elbow deep into a glute on an athlete? That's ridiculous. When in reality, we see that very light stroking of the spine towards the sacrum, distally away from the head, tends to calm most athletes down. So again, it's if we take away those boxes and we look at the system as a sensory component, and the sensory component being afferent, efferent, sympathetic, parasympathetic, central, and peripheral, which is a lot of different sensory systems. If we look at those as the dominant factors behind a client's need for care and our ability to influence that care on them, um, then those boxes become less important and we start thinking it's percentages that help. So if I really want my client to get better, I'm going to throw everything I can at them. Everything. I don't care what helps you get better. I care that you get better. I'd have no attachment to the title I give to my treatment. So that's why, like in my session, in my website, it just says massage therapy, book a session. And it says first time or repeat session. That's it. It doesn't say, like I have, okay, what is sports? And I have all these pictures of athletes that I've worked with, and I have pediatrics, and I have research papers around the reason why massage is good for the pediatric population, especially preterm infants. I have research up there around just, ASMR and a podcast I've done up there. I have portions that talk about the important aspects of it, but you can't sign up for a massage that says hot stones, Swedish, deep tissue therapeutic. You just sign up for a session. And what you present me on that given day is I will meet you there. But it means I have to have everything in my toolkit. So that's the kitchen sink theory. It's throw everything you can at your clients to help them get better, and stop being stuck in this box of cupping is the solution or kinesiotape. I mean, I've been a kinesiotaping instructor longer than I've been a teacher on my independent self. And yet it's the same concept. I might use it in a lot of my sessions, but it's not what helped my clients get better. It's one component of the therapy.
Absolutely. I believe we have a question from Vincent.
Yeah, Troy, I just want to address something that you mentioned, and maybe I misheard it, but you were mentioning that if a client doesn't, I'm gonna phrase it my own way. If a client doesn't get better, your toolbox isn't big enough, or you're missing something out of your toolbox. That's my way of reinterpreting what you said. But if you don't have a connection with that person on a personal level, no matter how many tools you have in your box, right? Is that not part of it?
Yes, absolutely. Except, and I agree. I mean, there are some clients who you just don't get along with. That happens. Or that you don't have that connection to. It's not that you don't get along with, although sometimes you don't get along with your clients. But if I had a client who, like you just said, like if there's no connection, it doesn't matter the tools. Well, one of the tools that should be in my box is learned how to create a connection. So like some of my clients who come in, I have the chief of the cancer department comes and sees me here at the hospital. She comes and sees me for care. Our first sessions when we talked were so medically heavy. I mean, I don't know how much you guys know about neuroplasticity, but I mean, I was getting into the most advanced nitty-gritty sodium and ion channels of negative 700 millijoules to create an axion spike that travels. I mean, we were getting into it because that's what she needed for her to feel a connection. 4 sessions later, we're talking about chakras. But it's like, to get to that connection, one of the tools has to be, I better be able to speak medical. But another one has to be, if somebody comes in and they just want empathy, I better be able to have empathy and not have that medical terminology and just sit there and say, you're right, that pain sounds very unpleasant. We're here to help. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how the neuroscience works and how it changes your brain. We will eventually, but for today, all I want to do, you just want my hands on your body, so let's just put hands on bodies. So yes and no. Like if I don't have the connection, toolbox doesn't matter. But that toolbox and the way you described it is what I do with my hands. My toolbox starts on the phone. When they call me and they book a session, that's my first toolbox. Where did you hear about me? Because I don't do marketing. I only do word of mouth. What's your pain? The first phone call usually takes, most people call and they go, I just want a quick, can I have an appointment? I'm usually on the phone with them for 45 minutes doing an intake on the phone. I want them to know, tell me about your life, because that's what's going to get us to understand, what are your active daily lifestyle activities? What is your ideal level of activity? A toolbox includes so much more than my hands or my cups or my tape or my tools. It includes my intake and my interview, but it includes what I dress. It includes the music. It includes the lights. It includes the pictures on my walls. It includes every component. So yes and no. If I don't have the connection, it's hard to get through, obviously. But one of the tools should be how to create a connection. And that's not necessarily something we're taught very often in massage. At least I know in my school it wasn't. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the way the massage industry is set up, I worked on GR in Colorado for a long time as well. So I'm very passionate about this stuff as well when it comes to pushing the massage therapy profession forward. But one of the things that we see is that a lot of students, for better or for worse, whatever it is, when they graduate, you get separated into two categories. One wants to go into self-employment and one wants to go to work for another person. And the one who wants to go work for someone else, you don't need those interpersonal skills as much. You're not the one booking the phone calls. You're not the secretary. You're doing an intake, then you're treating, and then you're doing an outtake. And possibly they're booking online. They might very rarely communicate with you outside of that 5-minute intake. My first sessions, I think my intake lasts almost 50 minutes. They only book an hour to an hour and 15. So they might only get 5 to 10 minutes of hands-on in that session number one. But sometimes it takes 50 minutes, 45 minutes of talking to make them feel connected and heard. Like they want that connection before I put my hands on their body. So I don't know if that answers the question. That one of the tools is actually that communication to get to that level where they feel safe with you, and then you can do your treatments after that. But people rush to the treatment. I have 5 minutes to do my intake. They got to get on the table, 43-minute massage, 2-minute exit interview, 5 minutes to change over the sheets, go pee, grab a sip of water, next session, right? Like, not that we all do those, but those are definitely sessions that type of model exists and is very popular in North America. And so when that exists, where's their time to sit down for 45 minutes and have the client tell you how much their pain has affected their life and how it took them away from being a collegiate pro, or how it takes them away from picking up their grandchildren, or how it takes them away from making love to their spouse, or how it takes them away from dancing salsa. Like how do they have time to express that? And they probably want that more than your hand on them. They probably want a sense of empathy first. And it's a tricky scope of practice boundary. We're not therapists, we're not psychologists, but we have ears. So as long as we don't offer feedback and we stick to, if they tell me that emotionally it's hard for them to not be walking in nature because it hurts, they have plantar fasciitis and they can't go out for a walk in the snow, but winter's their favorite season, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to explain to them why plantar fasciitis hurts them and what we're going to do to get them through it, and relate it back to when you feel pain-free or you have less discomfort, what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to go test it by walking in the woods. So they know I heard, and I haven't even touched their body yet, and yet they feel instantly there's a safe, we're on the same page, we're going in the same direction. So one of the tools in the toolbox does need to be communication. And in the class that I teach, the sensory approach to manual therapy, we do that. We do an entire session, an entire portion lab where, you get very, very, very personal, and you don't have to share it with other people in the lab. It's all individualized, but you get as personal as you want. And I've had, different reactions in the many different classes I've taught, but we do this experiment where there's a mask on a piece of paper and you have to write down everything that's on the inside of the mask. And the inside of the mask is essentially what the world doesn't see about you right now and what we don't show the world. And then on the other side of the mask, we write down everything the world does see and everything we want the world to see about us. And we look to see how much are these far apart from each other, because you're asking your clients to do this. It doesn't seem like it, but when a client comes in and they're at a 7, 8, 9 on the pain scale, and they're limping and they can't think of walking. And in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, when you're pain free, you're going to be walking, not only walking, you're going to be snowshoeing, you're going to be picking up kids, you're going to be doing wood. We're so far apart. Their inner world is, I'm in pain, I can do F all. And their outer world is, you're telling me I'm going to be doing all this behavior in the future. And they're so far apart that there's this disconnect and they don't see how they relate to each other. And so we have to do it to ourselves as therapists to understand how we get there. So we do a lot of that as well to really build a set of tools that go just way beyond. I mean, the first part of the class is all about communication with clients, not about what I'm doing with my hands. And then, yes, we do a lot of hands-on material as well. Great question. Thank you.
Very cool. I know that a lot of times if a client will say, can you do the same thing that you did last time? No, because your body is very different today than it was the last time. And I'm going
I'm not
off
the same.
of your body.
And I'm not
And
the
I'm
same
not
either.
the same, and everything. Yeah, all the any cellular happenings and energy and all of that is not the same. So no,
Yeah.
I call it the snowflake of massage. You know, like
Yeah, and some
you
people
never.
want, yeah, some people want that cookie cutter, but what they're looking for is interesting, because even I've been shifting my mind slowly around this idea that um, what they're looking for is predictive text. They're looking for a known quantity, and predictive text is actually really important in getting healthy. I talk about this in neuroplasticity, because predictive text actually allows us to get to the learning behavior at a quicker pace. And so if they know that last time felt good, and they ask the same thing, what they're asking for is today going to feel good? They don't have the vernacular for it, but they're looking to say, is today going to feel good? Am I going to walk away feeling joyous like I did the last experience? Or am I going to be sore? Or what's the difference? And they may not have the words for it, but I think that's where I've actually started to switch my mind. And when they say, can you do what you did last time? I used to always be like, I can't, because it's a new day, but I can phrase, we're going to see, maybe you don't need the same type of work, but I promise you when we're done, the intent that I have is to always make you walking out feeling as good as you possibly can.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Sorry, my cat's kind of coming up to say hi. So what I would love to do now, if you don't mind, Troy, I think this would be a good opportunity. We're getting close to about the 10-minute mark left of having your brain to pick. I would love to open up the floor to see if anyone else has any specific maybe quick questions for Troy to answer
I want
based
you guys to
on.
know your questions can be anything. I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes to neuroscience, everything you're doing at this very second is related to neuroscience, let alone everything you're going to do in the future and you've done in the past. So you might not think it's related to what we talk about in class, but I promise you it's related to how we interact with our clients and how we interact with each other as therapists and what we do to our clients.
So if anyone has anything that everybody can just kind of take themselves off mute if you want, and we can kind of open this up as a little discussion, and feel free to raise your hand if you do have a formal question, or just simply go ahead and ask. Otherwise, I have a few other questions that I can start shooting off, but I would love to open up the floor.
Hi, this is Julie, and I just wanted to know the name of the podcast that Paul Ingram you mentioned does.
Yeah, so Paul Ingram doesn't do a podcast. He has a website, it's a blog, and it's called painscience.com. And there's a free section, and then there's a member section. That's how he makes his living. He's if you want the member section, you do have to pay and subscribe, but the free section is still quite amazing. And then if you really get into it, you'll eventually find yourself becoming addicted like I did and pay for all the goodies, because the information is quite revolutionary.
Thank you.
And I get no kickbacks for things like this. Like, I happen to love Paul's stuff, so I promote it. If I didn't love his stuff, I wouldn't promote it. I don't get kickbacks or anything like that.
Fair enough. All right. So
You're still on mute. She
go
has.
ahead. Go ahead, Roseanne.
Troy, do you have any autistic clients?
Yeah, so I've worked I mean, when I worked with prior to massage therapy, I was in a program here in Canada called special care counseling, which is for people with special needs. I myself have quite severe ADHD. Um, I'm neurodivergent, and I work a lot with neurodivergent individuals, mostly in the adult category, only because in Quebec, osteopathy really does, they don't have a monopoly, but it's like tomorrow I'm seeing a child, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in Quebec, osteopathy is much more the go-to resource for pediatric care. But when I was in Colorado, I used to teach at the Children's Hospital in Denver twice a year, and I worked a lot with them. And yes, I do. And these concepts, if you listen to the podcast I do on ASMR with Dr. Gulia Peoria, one of the things we talk about, similar, I imagine if you're asking about autism, it's because you either have clients or someone in your life with autism. And so you're probably familiar with the spectrum concept behind it. And the thing that's interesting is most humans, they can relate to the idea of a spectrum. They go, yeah, okay, autism is a spectrum, high functioning, low functioning. But they forget that spectrum includes everybody on this video recording right now, right? Spectrum includes everybody on the planet. And we just happen to have groups of people who are similar, and they get classified as X, Y, Z. And so like ADHD falls within the spectrum of autism, but it's on the high functioning side of it. And so when it comes to treating someone who's neurodivergent, be it autism, be it Ehlers-Danlos, be it trisomy 21, it doesn't matter what the diagnostic code is that you're going to give this individual. The key component is equilibrium. All humans are seeking equilibrium at all times. It's an evolutionary trait. We're always seeking equilibrium between our body. Our body is based off pH equilibriums, our stomach acid, our breathing, internal pressure, external pressure. Our cardiovascular system is based off of it, our lymphatic system. The entirety of our human behavior, waking, sleeping, drinking, eating, like waste exiting the body versus food coming into the body. The entirety of our structure, evolutionary wise, comes from a concept of equilibrium and balance. And so when you're looking at people who are neurodivergent, be it in an upregulated state, which would be manic hyperactive, which is much more where I fall into, versus where we call it downregulated state, where you're looking at somebody like trisomy 21, low functioning autism, things like that. What you tend to have is a lack of equilibrium. So for my sessions, when I treat people like this, sessions vary. If they come in and they're lethargic, they're apathetic, they're depressed, they're burnt out, my sessions are always fast. I change the music. It's upbeat music. The lights go up. There's no sleeping. But if they come in and they're manic, they're hyperactive, they're hysteric, it's the opposite. I change the music, goes back to my Enya, lights go down, tone of my voice changes, the cadence of my voice literally slows down to where I'll talk to them like this. A lower tone, which is registered through a concept in music called entrainment as more soothing. And so I'll lower my tone, I'll lower my cadence, and I'll try to speak in a rhythmic form where it's up and down and up and down if they're manic or hysteric. But if they're depressed and they're low, I will try to do the opposite. And I won't necessarily focus on the rhythm. I'll focus on scattered tones and frequencies, but faster. And I'll be more animated in my body language. So autism, trisomy 21, CP, doesn't matter what the version, hypertonia, hypotonia, it doesn't matter what it is. What you're looking at, what is their baseline state at that given moment that they're walking into the session for, and is the goal equilibrium? So does that mean you have to upregulate their system or downregulate their system? And we do an entire lab in the class called Up the Front, Down the Back, where we do strokes that specifically engage the parasympathetic nervous system with directional stroking, which we can do with our hands. I don't know if you guys know that, but if you stroke away from the brain, you're engaging the parasympathetic system. And if you stroke to the brain, you're engaging the sympathetic nervous system. And so when it comes to upregulating or downregulating, speed plays into it, how you touch, depth, the size, is it a full palm versus a fingertip? What is perceived as more influential to the body? You know, the finger versus the hand versus the depth versus the poke. Then also the direction plays into it with the grain of hair against the grain of hair. So yes, I don't know if that answers your question, but I definitely treat people with special needs and I incorporate the sensory system into it because they don't have a malfunctioning sensory system. That's not what we call neurodivergent. They have a different sensory system. And so because their sensory system is different, treatment should reflect it accordingly. That's why it's called the sensory approach. You know, I talked about all those senses, but everybody's senses are different and we perceive the world differently through our senses. Yes, Jason.
Thank you very much for asking that, Roseanne.
So, if I'm not mistaken, you're teaching a class at our conference in April?
That's correct. I'm teaching this 16-hour class, and then I'm also doing pain, the other 4-letter word, which the sensory class, also known as how massage therapy works. So like on your certificates, if you take the class, it'll say how massage therapy works. And that was just because it was marketing wise, it was easier to push out, but its true name is the sensory approach to manual therapy. There's a section in the class where we talk about pain for about 35 minutes, but I'm also doing a 4-hour lecture on pain, or 2 or 4, I can't remember, on 2-hour lecture specifically on pain and like the pain catastrophizing and really what happens in the brain and how pain is a learned behavior through the IASP's definition of pain, which is the International Association for Study of Pain.
This all sounds really interesting, and part of the reason it's been a busy full day, I legit was cooking and then eating dinner while listening, which is why I was off camera. So I could legit spend the entire weekend just in your class.
Yeah, it's a 16-hour class plus another 2 hours.
Yes. So Jason.
Yep.
The part that you missed right before you logged on, he will be doing, it's a 2.5-day course for the SAM, the sensory approach to manual therapy, and then a 2-hour afternoon for to round out that third day for a 2-hour pain course, which is actually going to be included if you take his SAM class.
And one of the things important to know too in the class is that, and I know we're getting close to time, but in the class we also do, I'm a big fan of research. I'm a researcher myself. I've published and things like that. There's a couple sections in the class where we update our palpations. So if you do myofascial release, if you do trigger point therapy, if you do Swedish, you do all these things, I don't tell you not to do it. I do all of those techniques in my class, but I do myofascial differently because, just randomly to leave you with a little tidbit before we leave here tonight, Robert Schleip, great researcher in myofascial studies, has shown quite conclusively that it takes more than 64 kilonewtons of force to stretch collagen, which is the amount of weight and pressure it would take to push a car in neutral parked up a hill. I guarantee you're not doing that to your client. So if you're not applying that amount of force to the fascia, you're technically not shearing collagen, which means no adhesions are changing. So are you doing myofascial release based on our previous understanding of fascia? And so we update our palpation to say, no, that's not how you stretch fascia. There are ways to do it, mainly through what's called vibration and oscillation and speed. And so we move into creep and dependency, things like that. So we'll update a lot of our hands-on techniques and spend a lot of time on the body adjusting the senses to understand how to input more into the body without overwhelming the brain.
So bring our tables.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is a hands-on. I mean, in the 16-hour class, a good 10 to 12 hours are all hands-on.
Yeah, we are getting ready to launch soon. I'm very excited about that. But the good thing is that we're actually, even though I think we're putting the pressures on ourselves for having this out, I'm just noticing some of the other chapters are just releasing their launch for something that's happening in like a month from now. So we're actually we're actually doing okay. There's only one chapter legal person, and they're doing their best. So, but we're going to now that it just rolled over to 8 o'clock.
You can type your message
So
if you need to, Jason.
I
Sorry,
have
Jason
one
had his hand up. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead. Is it quick, Jason?
I was just going to say, given that my next available appointment is in May, telling me in advance that, oh, I want these days is the only way you're going to get me anywhere.
Well, we've been posting the save the dates, my friend.
Which is
Those
why
are not changing.
I have those dates held, which is part of the reason my next available is in May.
Perfect.
But if you told me at the end of March, in 2 weeks we're having a class, I'd be saying,
oh, I know, right? Yeah, no, we definitely wanted to get the save the date out there very quickly. So that being said, we are going to be, I would love, Troy, just for the quick bullet point, what is the cherry on top of the frozen dessert or ice cream dish, because we're going to be having an ice cream frozen dessert social at this event. So what would be that cherry on top of what SAM approach is for you? What's your greatest takeaway for SAM approach to leave us? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, my earpods died. I think for me, the most significant thing, the big bullet point would be clients respond to sensory input. And so sensory input should never be limited to what we do with our hands. It should absolutely be all inclusive to, and not just what we do with our sound and our voice, but the actual words we use have value and impact. And so what we do with our hands is incredibly powerful, but your hands have very little power if your client doesn't trust you. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so very, very, very much. Thank y'all for coming. We appreciate you.
I look forward to seeing some of you guys in April. I can't wait.
Absolutely. The next call, the next New Hampshire roundtable will be coming up the first Tuesday.
Oh, you went on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First Tuesday of March, that will be the 5th of March, 7 p.m. We will have another fellow presenter for our conference and retreat, and that will be Mr. Nathan Fay for Eric Dalton techniques. So he will be joining us as well. So thank you so much, Troy. Greatly appreciate your time. Greatly appreciate you, and appreciate everybody who's been on the call. Thank you so very much.
Have a great day, everybody. And I'm going to type in the chat here just so you guys will if you quickly the name of the podcast. Therapy spelled correctly, not incorrectly. Sorry, that's my bad.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. And feel free to follow me on
Thanks.
Instagram or social media if you guys want. I do a lot of my updates there as well. Have a great night, everyone.
Night, everybody.